After every day of begging, Jafari always crawled back to his tiny room inside one of the old tin houses a few meters away from Mukurukwajenga entrance. Along the way home, he would always buy takeout food which would be nicely packed for him inside transparent polythene bags. He would then stuff them inside the side pockets of his dirty worn-out jacket. He would always have difficulties maneuvering through the overcrowded slum. Eventually, those who are walking would pave way for him to crawl through. He always wore slippers on his knees and on the palm of his hands to ease movement and prevent his knees and palms from being bruised. The dangerous alleyway that led to his house was always deserted. Only thugs and drug abusers used this alleyway. Drugs were secretly dealt alongside this alleyway. Any innocent person who found themselves trying to use this lonely lane as a shortcut would be mugged and mistreated by thugs who would spring out of nowhere from the various tin houses structured alongside. It is said that all the tin structures along this alleyway were rent-free because long time ago their owner had been gunned down in a shootout with the cops as they were trying to apprehend him for drug dealing. After that, a cousin of his had tried to fetch rent from the houses, but all the law-abiding citizens deserted the section, saying it was too insecure for them. The cousin then deserted the place himself, fearing for his life after receiving death threats, and left for a country where he never emerged from ever since. The tin structures were then left for the thugs to live in rent-free. Jafari was back then the top dog in the area. He was the lead gang operator in Mukurukwajenga. Everyone who knew him back then would testify how Jafari used to be cold and ruthless to snitches while at the same time a smooth operator to the herb users. He had been the head of drug distribution alongside the former owner of these tin houses. After the death of his friend, Jafari had continued to deal until one fateful evening when his life took a different turn. On that fateful day, he had earlier on asked his boys to move the dope as was always the case. After an hour or two, the boys always called to certify that deals had been sealed and that dough was on its way, but on this day, 3 hours later, there was still no call. That's when Jafari decided to go with a few more of his boys, all of them heavily loaded, to see what had caused the delay. The taxi that only ferried thugs around the city as they always paid 5 times the normal price came to fetch them. Jafari was feeling uneasy as he and his boys got into the taxi. He wondered why his boys had not come from the Shaurimoyo trip when it had normally taken them only 30 minutes to come back on the previous days. The gangs in Shaurimoyo had always been amicable, leaving him to wonder what could have gone wrong. As the car sped out of Mukurukwajenga, going through Kware and quickly into Outer Ring Road, Jafari took a few deep breaths on realizing that he had been holding his breath. After a brief stay on Outer Ring Road, the vehicle branched into Jogoo Road, and before long they were speeding past Amza, going at a speed of 200 kilometers per hour. At that speed of lightning, they did not even blink before passing Makadara DC and leaving people at the Makadara bus stage with their mouths wide open. They almost caused an accident around Makadara Uchumi area, but the seasoned getaway driver quickly evaded what could have otherwise been fatal. They took a turn after City Stadium roundabout and past the Juakali sector in Shaurimoyo, took a few more turns and came to a sudden halt. "I can't go past here," said the taxi driver. "Why not? I'm paying you too," barked Jafari. "You don't understand, it's too dangerous for me." "That's why there's a risk cover, fool." "No, Jafari, I don't feel like it." "Get out of your feelings. Drive." The taxi driver reluctantly drove on as Jafari pointed out the directions until they reached near the border of Shaurimoyo and Pumwani, where there was a road that branched away from the main road just near the bridge and went alongside a black-watered river that had seen the best of pollution. It was there that they got into a compound in the middle of mud-story buildings. No sooner had they parked than live bullets started splattering their windscreen and got the driver in the head. An ambush had been laid for them, and Jafari should have known with all the experience he had gained in the game. In a blink of an eye, everyone in the car was dead apart from Jafari, who had not been touched by a single bullet. These people's guns had silencers, so the bloodbath was not noisy. Jafari panicked and tried to get out of the car and make a run for it. As he was trying to run, they put two on his buttocks and one at the intersection between the waist and the spinal cord. Then, as if the plan had not been to kill him, the shooting stopped, and then there was a wild laughter followed by sarcastical claps. Jafari, 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 you are out of your game. That's what you get for playing me. A big black dude said as Jafari passed out. After coming to, Jafari found himself outside his tin house in Mukurukwajenga. How he had gotten there was beyond his knowledge. He could not walk, stand, or lie on his back. All he could do was lie on his stomach and hope for the best. He knew that going to the hospital was out of question as it would raise too many questions. He lied there waiting to die while hoping for the best. Not long after, he was found by one of his remaining boys on a pool of his own blood. The boy, Jeffrey, became his nurse and from that day looked after him until the wounds healed. Jeffrey, however, eloped with all that Jafari had made from drug dealing and was never seen again. All the savings Jafari had been hoping to buy a wheelchair with went down the drain just like that. Now he could not afford even a pair of crutches. That's how he had resorted to begging. Jafari remembered all these as he was making his way through the crowd and went into the deserted alleyway that he had known all his life. He assured himself that he must warn Justin, Jonte, and Kent about the danger that was looming ahead of them. He did not know why he cared about them, but he was certain that the boys' stars were shining bright as he had seen something different in them, though he could not exactly point out what it was. He finally got into his tiny tin house and plunged himself onto the small bed using all the strength he had on his arm muscles. While sitting on the bed with his back supported by the weak wall, he swallowed his dinner and wallowed on the unpillowed bed. That night he barely slept, thinking about the three boys. The self-independent kids, or in short sick, as they had come to be nicknamed by people from Jenga, did not head straight home that evening. They stopped at each motura selling joint by the roadside since Jonte and Kent could not have enough of the street delicacy. All Justin did during every stop was chat with the kids who chill out by the roadside while enjoying hearing them roast each other. Everybody knew who they were, so harassments were kept to the minimum. At one point, they met some moms in miniskirts dancing next to a minivan that had a huge speaker on top of it and a FMC who was hyping Coca-Cola products. The minivan was branded as well as the FMC and the whole crew. Buy Fanta and win a shopping voucher, free airtime or cash rewards, the FMC announced repeatedly. Justin decided to try it out. He put his sack down and asked Jonte to look after it. Kent also wanted to try his luck. Jonte, not wanting to feel left out, also joined them. They forgot about their sacks in that moment, even though they had remained with one bag of weed each. Pinchez had been following the boys from a distance. You wouldn't tell him apart from the Doilers of Jenga because he had up to this point deserved at least an Oscar nomination. There was something about the light-skinned boy with Somali-like hair and big brown eyes that prevented him from making the move he wanted to make. When that boy smiled, revealing the milky white teeth with a hard-to-notice gap on their top front, Pinchez recognized the boy's looks. He in fact felt a sense of belonging to the boy. The boy reminded Pinchez so much of his long-lost brother. Pinchez wanted to know the name of this boy and hoped that he was somehow related to his brother Dave. The last time Pinchez had seen Dave was 15 years ago, when David had decided to sell everything he had inherited from their late father and go to the big city to try his luck in business. He had sold 5 acres of land, including the house that he had his wife Jackie and barely lived in, 10 cows and 12 goats. He had told Pinchez that if all did not go well, then he would never come back, since he had sold everything that tied him up to the village. Pinchez never heard from his brother ever since. Now he was staring at a boy who looked exactly like his brother. He started feeling like this would distract him away from his mission of busting the drug syndicate in the area, and hoped it would not. He remembered that he had become a detective in the hope that someday, while carrying out his duties, he would be able to find his brother and share the good news that he had bought back all the land that he had given away. Pinchez saw the boys stop by the minivan, surrounded by the moms in miniskirts who were dancing seductively. He saw the boy who looked like his brother drop his sack down as the FMC was talking about the giveaways for anybody who bought Coca-Cola products. He saw the other 2 boys join them. Pinchez saw this as a perfect opportunity to check what was inside the sacks, since everybody's attention had been diverted to the mamas in miniskirts who were shaking what their grandmamas had given them like no other man's business. He tiptoed towards the sacks like a cat, or in the act of dancing to the dancehall music that was playing so loud that business around that part of the slum had come to a standstill, and everybody's attention was directed to the roadshow. He managed to get a hold of one of the sacks. He peeped inside and saw something wrapped up in a khaki bag. "Pave way, I need to pass," a motorcycle rider shouted. He lifted the 3 sacks up to give way for the motorcycle to pass. Just then Kent looked his way. "Justin, Jonte, look, someone is trying to steal our sacks," Kent shouted. "Who? Let's retrieve them." Justin became alert. Pinchez walked out of the scene fast. The boys went after him. "Don't forget your giveaways," the FMC announced after them, but the boys had to do everything they could to get their sacks back, as they could not go back to Chico without the remaining bags of weed. Pinchez knew what he was doing. He went fast enough through the alleyways that led to isolated places to pull the boys away from the slum. Once he was certain that they were completely out of the slum, Pinchez ran to make the boys chase after him. They did exactly that. After negotiating a few corners, he reached to his van, hid himself between it and the wall nest to which he had parked it, then waited. "Where did he go?" Jonte asked in confusion. "Are you looking for your socks?" Pinchez came out of hiding and scared the boys almost to death. The startled boys felt fear creeping inside them. They knew that he had been tricked and led into a trap. Justin was, however, more shocked than his friends. His mouth was wide open. His big eyes got even bigger. He thought he had seen his father's ghost as he dropped to the ground with a thud. "Justin, what's up?" Kent wailed, but Justin had passed out. Pinchez was not expecting this. He had intended to find out what was in the boys' sacks without them finding out, but they had found out, and everything had led to this. The passing out of his brother's lookalike, who he had just heard being called Justin, had added weight to the suspicion that this boy could be his nephew, and so he could somehow lead him to his brother. He knew that his cover in Jenga would be blown if he were to reveal himself to the boys. He had no choice. The cover had to be blown, or a different plan had to be made up immediately. "Let's take him to a hospital. He could be sick." Pinchez told the boys. "Who are you? We cannot trust you." Jonte barked. "Your friend's life is on the line. I will tell you who I am later. I will not harm you." The boys seemed to be in agreement. They knew that they had no otherwise. Pinchez unlocked the doors of his van. "You have a car?" Kent exclaimed. "Who are you again?" Jonte asked. "I'm not a bad person, I promise. I'll tell you everything later. Right now, let's save your friend's life."